Support for this podcast comes from MetaView, the platform that uses AI to automatically write your interview notes for you, powered by GPT-4. Recruiters and hiring managers at companies like Robinhood, Brex and Genentech describe MetaView as a game changer for their efficiency and ability to have high-quality conversations with candidates. They can focus on the conversation rather than on taking notes. MetaView's interview summaries are purpose-built for recruiting, so they're 10 times more accurate and relevant than generic transcription tools. And they work seamlessly with your recruiting stack, video conferencing tools, and even mobile calls, so there's no need to change your existing workflows. You can see the magic for yourself for free on your first 5 interviews. Head over to metaview.ai/recruitingfuture. That's metaview.ai/recruitingfuture to get started.
There's been more of scientific discovery, more of technical advancement and material progress in your lifetime and mine than in all the ages of history.
Hi there, this is Matt Alder. Welcome to episode 520 of the Recruiting Future podcast. Storytelling is one of the things that makes humans human. In recruitment marketing and employer branding, stories persuade, create empathy, and drive the emotional connections that make people take action. With the rise of automation and generative AI, human-based storytelling is likely to be a key differentiator between employers. So, do we understand how to tell effective stories? And are our strategies around storytelling sophisticated enough to deal with a future of more disruptive change? My guest this week is Lauryn Sargent, co-founder of Stories Incorporated, and an expert in storytelling for recruitment marketing and employer branding. I caught up with Lauryn at the recent Unleash America conference to hear her thoughts on the future of storytelling and listen to the great advice she has to share. So hi Lauryn, and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm really delighted to be here.
My absolute pleasure. We're here at Unleash in Vegas. How's the show been for you so far? What interesting things have you seen or done or listened to?
It's been great for me. I really enjoyed yesterday. There was a panel on pay transparency, and that's something. Small company. I'm 22. My company's 22 people, but I'm doing some recruiting right now. And I used to be a recruiter in the past. I have actually struggled with how do we, with that topic. And it was great to see large organizations and all the different ways they're thinking about it. That was great. And the fact that actually it's one person at a company was saying, it's not actually the external stuff that is the challenge. It's the internal communication and what that means for transparency and discussions and people understanding what different bands are and where they are in that band and learning for the first time maybe what band their manager's in and those types of things that really impact engagement and the barrier to even broaching the subject of pay transparency. So it's not even really about candidates as much as it is about internal employees. So I thought that was great. I had a great time there.
Yeah, no, it's always great, these kind of shows, because there's so many different topics that kind of get covered. I suppose to start with, we should ask you to introduce yourself and tell us what you do. What does your company do?
Yes, my name is Lauryn Sargent. I'm a co-founder in a company called Stories Incorporated. This is our 10th year in business. We do 2 things really well. The first is that we uncover stories from employees our clients choose that really communicate the culture and the job and the team. And then the second thing we do is we create media from those stories, optimized per candidate or employee-facing channel. So LinkedIn, career sites, all hands, intranets, those types of things.
I love the whole everything about storytelling. It's always been something that's kind of fascinated me. Do you think, as an industry, as an industry, employers understand storytelling and the power of it and how important it is as much as they should do? Or is it?
No. And I think, no. And I also think it's something that's very easy to say and has been said for years about how storytelling is so important. And I'm a storyteller and, all of this. But when you actually like dig down to what stories are you telling and what are the impact, it's pretty thin. So we still have a lot to go as an industry. I think people know the importance, but from a very surface and wow, that sounds good, and a strategic in the cloud idea. But when it comes down to the tactical, the brass tacks and the implementation of those things and actually changing perception or gaining engagement or, having candidates select in and out, those things are still pretty thin. We got a long way to go still.
So talk us through the elements of a good story. So you obviously, we can talk about how you find stories and broadcast them and all that kind of stuff, but let's just get back to the absolute basics. Like, what makes a great story?
There's 8 things that we kind of use to define a story, and we don't have to go through all 8, but I'll tell you the ones that I think are really important for culture communication. Keep it easy. These are, again, when you're storytelling with the lens, I know that's been said a lot today, with the lens of communicating a culture or an employee experience. I think one thing that's very important is the balance of personal and professional stories. You absolutely have to have information about the person's work life, but how it impacts their personal life is really like a gold standard. On top of that, so I guess what's on top of gold? The best ever is to also make sure that you have the company as a character. It is all about the employee and their experience, but when you're communicating culture, you do have to involve the company in the decision they've made that has impacted the employee, or the thing that the employee's gone through that the company has supported and had to change or figure out. So those are to me, those are the best elements of a story that's meant to engage employees or candidates.
And I suppose it's that kind of, it's that sense of a journey, isn't it? It's kind of like, this is what happened, this is what they overcame.
Yeah.
I love the idea of the company as a character in the story. That's a really interesting way of thinking it. And how do people go about finding stories? Because I think that seems to be maybe an issue for a lot of, how do I find these stories? Looking for something that's interesting or something that's going to sort of tick all of those boxes.
Yes, I think we have a perspective here. There's no one way, but what I think the best way to, first of all, find the storyteller, and then also apply a method on top of it for interviewing that gets a great story every time. That's what we say. We get a great story every time from every person, no matter who it is. But it does start with the people that you're asking to share. Sometimes we do know that something has happened. Someone's raised their hand. I want to talk about this thing that I went through that the employer helped me through. But oftentimes it's more of like the company saying, okay, well, you want to, talk about women leadership and mentorship. So therefore, let's pick our best, most talented mentors that clearly have a track record of growing talent, or the person who has been able to skyrocket their career because they've been so well mentored. So picking, you don't have to necessarily know what the story is before, but having an idea of the types of people that you'll ask because of the types of experience you think they have. On top of that, though, I think it must. But again, consider my perspective because of what we do. It has to be a conversational interview. Everything's facilitated. For us, we think a lot about psychological safety, people sharing. In some cases, sometimes I say that every third interview day is like somebody's crying. There can be some emotional things, but do you really want the employee storyteller, the person that you're trying to get great content from and stories from and getting them to share, it's prepping them just enough so they're comfortable. Hey, we're going to talk about your experience here. Hey, we're probably only going to use 30 seconds, but please expound,
Yeah.
And hey, don't be concerned about how you look because it's professional and you want to see what you look like with great lighting. So just making sure people are really comfortable to share, and then making sure that interview process is facilitated and conversational.
Yeah.
So it's not like I'm going to ask you 10 questions. It's really listening and asking. And when you interview for video, sometimes it's like, that was great. I think it's really cool that XYZ happened. Can you tell it again? Focusing it in, or like expounding it up. So anyway, that's a long answer to your story, to your question.
It's a great answer. It's as I say, I find this whole thing absolutely fascinating.
You would, because look at what you did, right? Yeah,
absolutely. And so I suppose in that bit of safety there, does it help that you're kind of an independent who's removed from the employer? Do you think that that is, well, obviously you think that's a great way to do it because that's what your business does, but do you think that that's something the employer should be mindful of if they're trying to get people to tell stories, having that sort of that kind of distance from the person?
I think it's an advantage, but it's not a necessity that it's an outside. Could be somebody that works at the company. I mean, of course, yes, we're an outside party that comes in. I think what's most important to think about is just that if the audience is candidates, if you do work together, there's a shorthand, and that's not helpful sometimes to candidates. So it's nice to have someone say, what is that acronym, or what does that mean? Or I don't know what happens on Taco Tuesdays. Maybe I do. I don't know. You know what I mean? But whatever it is, it's like, it's nice to have that, like, oh, I don't know what that is. Can you explain it? I don't know what your job is. Can you explain it? Oh, interesting. So you work on Saturdays? Oh, I didn't know. Those types of things. They're not helpful to candidates, so that's one thing.
So you've got we've talked about the storytelling and the things that make it stand out and how you get the stories and all those sort of things. Where do we tell these stories? How and how? I mean, how do you take that kind of content and make it work in different channels for different audiences and all those things?
Yes. So it's just the hardest part is getting the great content, but once you have it, don't mess it up. Don't make it distracting and hard for people to consume it. So one is understanding the channels really well, and sometimes there's the classics of things you can Google. Hey, what kind of content performs best on LinkedIn? But a lot of it is testing and seeing what the engagement's like. The algorithms change all the time, so sometimes it's that. But you don't, and also not being afraid to use it many times. Yes, you don't want to use the same story a zillion times and tire it out as if this is the only good thing that ever happened at your company. But with space, you can try a 30-second snippet video here. You can try an audio clip of the same story in another format just to see what works. But I think what's most important is understanding the channels, testing, and then getting it right. And relaunch if you have to. It's no big deal.
I think that's interesting as well, because I think that a lot of the time when you talk about storytelling, people are imagining this is a long form video. This is kind of something that requires deep engagement and all this kind of stuff. But a photo can be a story.
Yes.
And so it's kind of like, what do you have? Obviously, things are channel specific, but are there formats that work for particular types of story better?
Yes. Well, I think it depends. We really do like short stories, but they have to be to the point then. It can't be, we have this thought of like, just don't make it a testimonial. I like working here. That is not a story. It does not help.
Yeah.
But I do think for some of the longer form type contents, like for the most popular video that we sell, because it is so versatile, is like 90 seconds or less. In a 90-second video story, you can have one person that actually can get into it with you, that's still substantive, but it's fast. Or you could have a theme where you have 2 to 3 people sharing a story that aligns to that theme to make so that it shows that culture is pervasive. That I think is really powerful. It's like, it's just not this one person's experience.
Yeah.
It's several people's experience, that's tied to a value or a theme that company is trying to convey about their culture.
And with business storytelling, I suppose that very often people don't talk about things like empathy and emotional connections and stuff like that, but that's vital in any kind of storytelling, isn't it?
It is. And we do get those types of stories, but I have to tell you, one of my favorite projects we've ever done that we just wrapped was a project for a gaming company that was doing rewards and recognition, and they wanted to do something different. So we came up together with this idea of filming a conversation between a manager and employee. And the questions, the discussion, we facilitated the discussion and we filmed it. But the questions were like, what do you like about being my manager? It got very emotional.
Yeah.
And then at the end of at the very end, the team member was told that they won a culture award. But in that discussion, it's like the manager highlighting all the things that they had done for appreciation. So I love that because it was we were there, we were facilitating, but it was a conversation between two people who had a good relationship, and that came through. You know, we did this. I want to say we made 10 videos this way, 10 different pairs for 10 different culture awards. And that was really powerful because it was like it showed the connection, which is hard to convey. It's hard to show.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I have to ask you this because you can't move in this place without someone talking to you about generative AI.
Yeah.
In fact, I was running a panel on talent audits and workforce planning this morning, and the first thing,
I was there. It was very good.
You were, and
the
first thing someone said was generative AI, which I hadn't even thought would come into the conversation. So, as I say, it's the big story at the moment.
Yeah, it is.
And you know, one of the use cases that's been identified is things like writing job descriptions and recruitment marketing and all that sort of stuff. Where does that fit in with storytelling and humans? What's going to happen?
You know, maybe ask me 6 months from now, I'll have a different answer. Although at the panel today, someone was saying, "Hey, this has existed for 4 years. This is not new. It's just more accessible." And
which is true.
But I would say that because our focus is on one person's experience, that isn't something that can be generated or replicated. Where I would see it help us is, when we write potentially would be when we interview someone and get transcripts, or maybe helping with interview questions, even like if we would submit questions we might ask. That said, our process is still, we're not going to sit and ask the questions, but could help with some planning and just some things to ask. But in terms of the content itself, because we're so focused on one person's experience, it's so human. I don't know but again, ask me 6 months, maybe I'll have a whole different, but right now I'm not seeing a huge, something huge impacting our work, the way we approach it.
What strikes me about it is if everyone starts using Bard, ChatGPT, whatever it is for recruitment marketing, then, I know these are large language models. I know you can get them to do different things, but I suspect that lots of marketing will look very similar, just because people will be asking very similar questions to the models. So surely then human-based storytelling becomes a massive differentiator for employers who invest in that kind of approach.
Yes, well, and someone asked me today, we didn't go into this to the depth that we did, the depth right now. But they asked me, well, do candidates even care that it's real employees? Because couldn't you just put something that's AI generated in the script, and there it is, and it's a fake thing?
Yeah.
I'm like, but it does matter. I mean, do candidates know? Maybe, but you would know. The candidate would know. The authenticity. You're all after. I know authenticity's been overused, but that would just fly in the face of everything that you're trying to communicate about your brand if it's all fake, and
I think that's interesting about authenticity as well, because we've been through a very long period where the authenticity is kind of thrown around like agile and other words, and they almost become meaningless. But I think that we're heading back to an era where authenticity has never been more important, where everything can be fake, and ultimately you want to persuade people to work for your organization, and if you fake that and it's not authentic, then people won't stay, and what's the point?
Oh, nightmare, right? I mean, it's not the expectation. You're not setting the right expectation of what the culture is like, and it's a retention disaster. Totally.
Yeah, absolutely. Question about the future to finish off with. How do you think recruitment marketing is going to develop? Because to me, recruitment marketing is still kind of a long way behind other forms of marketing, particularly, not just with technology, but also with things like storytelling and that kind of stuff. What do you hope is going to happen over the next few years? AI withstanding. Where would you like to see recruitment marketing going?
Well, my answer is going to be strange, because I'm going to start with something that isn't quite related to recruitment marketing. But one of the biggest frustrations that I've had for years and years and years is that we create this great content and it's got one purpose only, because large organizations are so siloed. So we create a great series for employer brand, internal comms doesn't see it, or engagement doesn't see it, or alumni doesn't see it. And I'd say that now we are seeing this evolution where people are developing kind of storytelling practices where it's very well disseminated. We're selling a lot into corporate communications because they have so many different audiences, and things have changed, especially during COVID, where employee stories are being used to communicate culture and what organizations do for people, and there's just so many different audiences who care about that now. Like, companies being canceled because of the way they've treated an employee. And so, it's very important to show that you're progressive and working on things and having employee stories. So I'd say that recruitment marketing, just basically being more of a steward of the story to get that to other avenues, that we see that happening, which is wonderful for me. I love that. But also, just with every time a new channel pops up, it's a new way to think about how to tell a story on that channel that's most effective. So I'd say that that's always going to evolve. And just the every time a different place where candidates go to find information about a culture, that's a different way to tell stories and have to figure that out. So, and also, I think one thing that is kind of surprising is, we just came through COVID. I know I still talk about it all the time, but we had this thought of filming at home, which we did too. We filmed at home. Yeah. But I'd say that even then, that would have been the time that relaxed video standards and would have become more accepted. And I think audiences are even more being discerning about quality, substance, and visual. Mm-hmm. So I'd say that I actually think it's going to be in the other direction of kind of where I am, as opposed to, more unpolished content.
Right.
But that's my perspective. We'll see.
Lauren, thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you. This is fun.
My thanks to Lauren. You can subscribe to this podcast in Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or via your podcasting app of choice. Please also follow the show on Instagram. You can find us by searching for Recruiting Future. You can search all the past episodes at recruitingfuture.com. On that site, you can also subscribe to our monthly newsletter, Recruiting Future Feast, and get the inside track about everything that's coming up on the show. Thanks very much for listening. I'll be back next time, and I hope you'll join me.
This is my show.
HR technology is a heck of a business. Investors are putting more money into it, employers are using artificial intelligence more and more, and analytics are applied to everything from performance to engagement to workforce planning. I'm Mark Pfeffer, the editor of the HCM Technology Report and the host of People Tech, the podcast that's all about technology and how HR puts it to use. Subscribe to People Tech wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.